Hi, good evening. My name is Kendra Braucher, and my study was on the effects of positive reinforcement on reducing disruptive behaviors in kindergarten. Like I said, my name is Kendra. I am a special education teacher in a pre-K through second grade elementary school building. It's my 11th year of teaching special ed, and I've taught levels 1, 2, and 3. I've had the whole gamut of any type of student with an IEP. I got my bachelor's degree in special education from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And so I was certified K-12 with an emphasis on cognitive disabilities. So it's where they do things a little bit different up there. But so in Iowa, I have my Strat 1 and 2 with my ID disability endorsement. I'm working on my master's degree at Morningside, and I'm also working on my special education consulting endorsement. So basically, when I was thinking about problems that I wanted to look into, my main thing was that there's just so many disruptive behaviors in the general education classroom and that it's impacting the learning of students and their peers. So I chose this research because I feel like it's hard for teachers to focus on that academic instruction with so much behavior occurring in the classroom. So I thought if disruptive behaviors could be reduced, then students could make more academic progress. I feel like this research is important because disruptive behavior is actually the leading cause of stress for teachers, and it causes 1 in 3 teachers to consider leaving the education field completely. I also feel like that teachers are under just a lot more pressure for students to achieve higher academic success at younger ages, and I see that every day in a preschool through second grade building. The things that the little kids are needing to do were just not even on the radar when I was in kindergarten. So I looked at some past research with behavior in the classroom, and I found some studies on general reinforcement versus behavior-specific reinforcement, meaning teachers that say, good job, way to go, and just general praise versus more behavior-specific things like, I love how you're keeping your hands to yourself, or nice job standing in line. And so between 3 and 18% of reinforcement is actually behavior specific according to Jenkins. And that 18% is closer to more recent research, like closer to 2015. That 3% was back 30, 40 years ago when they did very few studies. Back then, only about 3% of those studies showed behavior specific reinforcement. In 2012, Fields looked at a study that showed rates of positive teacher-student interactions versus negative teacher-student interactions. He felt like if there was more positive interactions than negative, then behavior would be better. However, this research actually became inconclusive, that he didn't find any significant difference. Another study that I read about was verbal praise. And in this case, teachers were given a wire, they called it a bug in the ear, that they wore in their ear, and they were told when to give students praise. And they aimed to give praise at least 1 time per minute in this study, and they did find a significant difference. Disruptive behaviors went from 3.35 behaviors per minute to 1.6 per minute, so that there was a significant decrease. A few other things I found in past research was there's a strategy called the good behavior game, and this behavior method has been studied over the last 40 years. There have been different versions of it. Basically, the class is divided into 2 teams, and a team is awarded points for when they show positive behavior, or points are taken away if they violate some rules. There was a significant difference in this data by Flower and his team in 2014, so this is found to be an effective strategy. Another strategy that I found was by Tomlin and Reed, that was done in 2012, and they gave behavior-specific reinforcement on a fixed time schedule. And so they just every minute or every 2 minutes, they kind of had a specific interval where they gave that praise. And there was a significant difference with this strategy. Disruptive behaviors went from 25 to 35% of the time to 5 to 10% of the time. And then a final study that I read about, they called it small talk, where this research gave attention to students 2 to 3 minutes before class started. So they just sat down, had a conversation, talked for 2 to 3 minutes about soccer, football, piano lessons, just more personal things, and just gave that student that attention. And Patterson, this researcher, found that there was a significant decrease in disruptive behavior when they did do this. This study actually did an ABAB design, and so they went away from the small talk for a while, and then they did see behaviors increase, and then when they started it again decreased. So it did seem to make a difference. Some gaps that I found in the research was that while some research was found effective, there was other research with no statistical difference. So basically, some techniques that were used in one study may have not worked in another. Tomlin and Reed in 2012 found success, but Fields in 2012 did not. So there wasn't necessarily an overwhelming majority of success in one way versus another. The goal and purpose of this study, the purpose was to find out if using frequent positive reinforcement during direct instruction would reduce disruptive behaviors. And I really just feel like this will impact education, because if we can find ways to reduce these behaviors, then students and teachers can be more focused on the academic instruction and kind of help students make faster progress in that area, in those areas. So how does this research impact me as a practitioner? I think I just want to know ways that are going to work in my classroom. I want to find ways to reduce those behaviors. Currently I have a behavior disorder classroom, so the majority of my students have some sort of labeled behavior disability. So I want to figure out what's going to be most effective in reducing their behaviors, and then sharing those ideas with their gen ed teacher so that they can hopefully be integrated more than some of them are now. Not only I need to have those behaviors reduced in my classroom when we're doing direct instruction and SDI time, but also in the general ed setting, so kind of all settings of the building. So I used an A/B design to do this in order to show how much disruptive behavior was happening in the classroom and then how much would happen after the treatment was started. I used 4 participants. They were all in kindergarten, and they all had behavior and reading IEP goals. I used these students because I was co-teaching in kindergarten, and I have all of my kindergarten students we had put in one classroom. So I still did pull these 4 students for some small group reading time too, so that's when I took my data. But 3 of these students were male and 1 was female. 3 of them were Caucasian and 1 was Hispanic. And then 1 student also had a hearing impairment. What I used for my data analysis was I took tallies for the disruptive behaviors the students were having. And I took it for 9 weeks. The first 2 weeks were just baseline data where I gave minimal reinforcement. I couldn't not give any. I just don't feel like it was ethical to not ever say anything positive. So I would praise them, but it just wasn't necessarily frequent. And then I increased the frequency over the next 7 weeks so that I was giving them reinforcement at least 1 time per minute. And so in order to do this, I wore a motivator, which if you're not familiar, it's kind of like a timer, but it goes in your pocket and it buzzes. So it like vibrates and buzzes. So I had it set for a minute so it would buzz every minute to remind me. So I kind of piggybacked off that bug in the ear concept and past research that I looked at, and just to help me remember to give that reinforcement. And I really tried to focus on that behavior-specific reinforcement. I also used the FAST assessment to track letter sound fluency, to see how many letter sounds per minute they could produce, and I wanted to see if when disruptive behaviors were reduced, if the academic achievement would increase. So this is the tally sheet that I used to take the behaviors. So I had each participant on one side, and then the behaviors I focused on were blurting, hands and feet not to self, out of seat, making noises, or leaving the classroom. And then below I put which behavior I was praising if they were doing it the way I wanted to, if I gave them behavior-specific reinforcement, or if I just gave each one general reinforcement, then I just put that in a column and that I said good job, or I like, you're doing a great job. Way to go. And so for my results that I got, my hypothesis was not confirmed. The difference in the classroom disruptions went from a median of 2.75 disruptive behaviors per class period to 1.86. So the trend was going in the direction where disruptive behaviors would decrease, but there wasn't a statistical difference. So the letter sounds did increase over the course of 9 weeks as the disruptive behavior decreased. That letter sound fluency did increase, but I'm not sure if that's just a matter of as the school year went on, they gained the academic achievement, or if it did have anything to do with the correlation of the reduced disruptive behaviors. So here are a couple of figures. The first one shows the total disruptions per treatment group. So the baseline disruptions and then the treatment disruptions. So that shows that it went down. And then the second figure shows those letter sounds that where the baseline started a little bit lower, and then after treatment, those did increase. So I did a paired sample t-test for the total disruptions, and my p-value was 0.467. So that's really not even close to showing a statistical difference, since we want that to be lower than 0.05. So although they decreased, it was really not even close to showing a statistical difference. Whereas my paired sample t-test for letter sounds, the p-value was 0.087. So that was trending a little bit more closely to showing some significance. Since it was closer to 0.05, it still wasn't considered significant. So the hypothesis, the null hypothesis, but it did show a little bit closer to possibly in the future there could be a statistical difference. So I learned from this study that frequent reinforcement does make a difference, even if it's not like significant, but that having that motivator to prompt the teacher is really helpful, because I think sometimes we get in a rut of just trying to get through the material that we forget, and we don't even realize that it can make a difference. And so having that motivator to prompt did help, really praise the ones who are doing what they were supposed to be doing. I think that my results meshed well with past research, because there was that small decrease in disruptive behavior, but that wasn't statistically significant like in other research similar to what Fields found in 2012. I think this should help teachers realize that if they really make the effort and really kind of put that extra effort into it, that maybe that reinforcement could make a difference. Being intermittent doesn't necessarily do much. It has to be frequently. So the limitations of my study was that there were only 4 students used, and they were all in kindergarten. I only did the first quarter of the school year, and at that first quarter, students aren't very mature. Some of them had just turned 5 years old. So the age makes a difference, and that scheduling is really difficult to be consistent that first quarter of kindergarten. So my suggestions would be next time just have that larger sample size across all grade levels, do it over a course of an entire school year, use multiple instructional times instead of literacy, maybe try some math, and have more than one teacher do this study to compare classroom data over a couple of different teachers and see their strategies. I think maybe a maturity level, it would be interesting to see if older students could take to that positive reinforcement more than the little ones. So here are just some of my references that I used in my study. And I feel like I had some good ideas from that past research with the bug in the ear and that small talk. And so I'm really going to try to use some of those strategies in my classroom as well to reinforce students. So good luck to all of you with the rest of your research and the rest of the school year. Thank you very much.